Hi there, I'm Christy Uffelman, and I am the founder and CEO of Edge Leadership, and it was my honor to be on the Leadership Café with Richard Citron and Michael Couch. And here is a sneak peek of what you will find if you choose to join in and listen to us. The first is that you are going to hear about some challenges in my career and at least one time that I failed spectacularly. You are also going to hear about what peer really stands for, PEER, in my new book, The Peer Revolution, and you may or may not see a cat in the background. I am inviting you to join us, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another edition of the Leadership Café, where we talk to extraordinary and really amazing people leading remarkable businesses. We're your hosts. I'm Richard Citron.
And I'm Michael Couch, and very excited to have today's special guest, longtime colleague and friend, Christy Uffelman. Christy is the founder and CEO of Edge Leadership. Plus, I'm going to read the 7 pages of a fantastic work experience that she's had, life experience she's had. No, but I'm just intrigued. Athena Young Professional Award recipient, recognized by the Huffington Post as a fierce woman. I love that one. Pittsburgh, one of the 40 below 40. Does that still fit? I shouldn't ask a woman that, I guess, but fantastic. And welcome, Christy. So excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me, gentlemen. It's always an honor to share space with you in person or virtually.
Or e-space, let's say sharing e-space. And of course, with the exciting thing for us is Christy has just published a great new book called The Peer Revolution. We're not going to talk about that though. But we're intrigued because it fits for a lot of great concepts on coaching and leadership development that fit the kind of experience that we have. But tell us a little bit more about your background, Christy. What are some of the key things through your experience that you think make a difference in how you approach and think about leadership today?
That is a good question. I would say, so the first thing that is important to know about me is that I challenge the status quo. Everything I do, I believe in thinking differently. And when you ask the question of what are some key moments in my leadership journey, the first one that I go back to was right out of college. I worked for Johnson & Johnson. So Pittsburgh girl, born and raised, McKees Rocks, went to Catholic schools all my life, including my undergrad at Duquesne. And my experience with Johnson & Johnson was I was a sales rep in the operating rooms. And my job was to teach surgeons new technologies for procedures that they had been doing for years and years. And while I got many things from that first job experience, probably the most substantial one was that I was a part of a mentoring program. And J&J had the philosophy in their sales organization that good sales reps mentored new hires, division managers, the sales reps, all the way up, the regional managers. The CEO at the time was actively involved in this mentoring program. And without having the language for it at the time, I fell in love with adult development. What I knew was that my favorite part of my job was mentoring the new hires. And so at the ripe old age of 24, I assumed that I should be a sales manager. Right? Isn't that what being a manager is all about? It's about developing people. So I went through the internal hiring process and I'm like, I want to be a sales manager. I've got, here are my numbers. Here are all my prerequisites. I'm a great salesperson. And J&J said, awesome. We'd love to have you, but you have to move out of Pittsburgh because in order to move up, you have to move out. I was a single mom at the time, didn't have any interest in leaving Pittsburgh, worked through a recruiter, landed there. So again, big global healthcare, still sales, this time as a sales manager. And it didn't even take me a year to go down in flames. because the qualities that make someone a great salesperson, let's say I was an A+ salesperson, which I wasn't, but just for the sake of conversation, that makes someone an A+ salesperson, make them at best a C- sales manager, right? So I hogged all the screen time. I couldn't hold anyone accountable. I would do for my people instead of creating the space for them to learn and grow. And luckily for me, Bear didn't fire me. They absolutely could have, because I was not a good sales manager. They instead pipelined me into learning and development. And that's where I discovered coaching. And then it was like, the skies parted. Remember from the old Bugs Bunny movies, like the skies parted, it's like, hallelujah. And I'm like, there's a whole job just focused on developing people. And I share that story as just one pivot, one moment in my leadership journey. But, whose fault was that? Was it mine as an overconfident millennial? Like, I can do this. I've never been a sales manager. I got this, put me in. Was it Bear's? Right? I didn't lie on my resume. They knew I didn't have any sales management experience. Do our organizations have a responsibility to train us for the jobs as we continue to move up? Sure. So I'd like to say that we both had a little responsibility in that, but that was absolutely probably one of the first moments in my leadership journey that I recognized, all right, I need to own my part of this. And what can I be doing to help other organizations own theirs?
Right. Hey, Christy, I love that story. And I want to ask you about another leadership moment. The first story you describe in your book is where you're working for the construction company, and you are scheduled to do an important presentation, not just a presentation before the board. And you get all duded up, and you're looking fantastic as you
just like I did
always do. But
today.
it was, you were doing your thing because you were a woman in a predominantly male-dominated industry, and you had to do twice as good to be you had to do twice as good to almost probably be perceived to be half as good, as is often the case in those situations. And you describe in the book how you get to the parking lot of the building, and it's raining, and you have to run in with your materials over your head, trying to stay dry. I love how you describe skidding into the front part of the building, and then having to get yourself ready. And that was so interesting to me. How did you, because those are kind of the transformational pivot points that often happen for people in seeing themselves as a leader. Can you share a little bit about that experience and what that did for you in your own leadership mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say, so the first thing that comes up for me when you share that is owning my part of the story. So, it was my first, so I had just been promoted to the executive team. So first female manager in the company, of course, then first female on the executive team. And this was my first big presentation to my peers on the executive team. And I had a lot of challenges at the time in my career, and I had been writing a story of what that meant for me. And so I had contributed to, and you don't know this when you first read the book, because I don't say that in the story, right? I let you write your own story about why and where I was at the time. But what that moment had for me was that after I dried my hair off in the bathroom under the hair dryer and pulled it back into a ponytail, because there was really no saving that. And I had taken my son to daycare, and he had a sniffle, and I probably shouldn't have taken him to daycare. Of course, in this post-COVID world, we would never do something like that, like send our kid to daycare and not take their temperature. You guys, I didn't take his temperature that day because I was a single mom. I needed to get him to daycare so that I could show up as an equal in the eyes of all of the guys that I was presenting to that day. After I went into that boardroom and killed the presentation in a good way, I came down to my office and I said, I'm not doing that again. I need to find a mentor. I had been a part of this great mentoring experience with these big companies, and now I was in a smaller organization. I'm like, well, I'm the first woman, at the VP level in the company. I'm not going to find someone higher up than me here. And I felt the responsibility, even at 29 years old, that other women were looking to me to fill that role for them in the organization. So I started looking outside, and I learned, and this is for the young leaders out there, I learned that you can't ask someone to be your mentor. I tried. It doesn't always work so well. I have all kinds of thoughts on how you can do that, but don't do the way I did. Like, hey, will you be my mentor? And when I couldn't find a mentor, and at the time I was specifically looking for a female mentor, someone that looked like me, someone who was a little farther along in her career to share their best practices. Instead, I created my first peer group, and that peer group changed my life, changed my career trajectory. It's what the book is about. It's what my company, Edge Leadership, is all about. It's about creating the space for intentional peer groups inside organizations and out. And that group shifted my mindset in that moment, in my challenge as a leader, helped me recognize and own what was the story that I was writing. And you guys, only when there's a great line from Brene Brown, who I've been privileged to be mentored by. And her line is, when we deny our stories, they define us. It's only when we own them that we get to write the ending.
Fantastic, Christy. And in fact, I think some of your, one or two of the people in your original mentor group may be future guests. So we'll see.
Oh, I love that. That would make me so happy.
Yes, we'll see. I think I knew who they were, so we'll find out. But so what you just explained is what we love to hear on the cafe all the time. Successful leaders just don't have this single trajectory, to their success. And of course, they never fail. Right?
In flames. When I fail spectacularly.
Yeah, the best thing that ever happened to me was getting fired. So yes, phenomenal. But I love, so that's the kind of all those experiences you've been through. You've sort of gleaned together in your approach with Edge Leadership. It sounds like that's the foundation there. So I think that's a great lead into the peer revolution. Tell us a little. You've mentioned a little bit, but tell us more about where that came from and what do you intend to accomplish with your book?
So I started the company in 2013 and was grateful to incubate Edge Leadership in a larger organization called Align Leadership that was run by a mentor of mine, Dr. Mary Shippey. And it was a tremendous opportunity. I had been a solopreneur before I was in the role that we were talking about earlier with the story of skidding into the lobby. I had left Bear and started my first company at 27. It was called Red Zebra Consulting. And I was a solopreneur, and oh gosh, I got in my own way and I've got all kinds of stories and learning moments in that. But what's important to note is that when I launched Edge, I didn't want to do it alone. I wanted to be in community. It was really important to me to be in the space with leaders and entrepreneurs who were a little farther along in their career trajectory than me, and I wanted to be in community. I had learned with the Working Mothers group, which was the very first peer group that I had started, I had learned that and I think it is very symptomatic of my generation. I love collaboration. As a millennial, I grew up in classrooms where the desks were in pods, not rows. And, we worked together and collaborated, and I wanted to learn and develop myself in that same way, not just to create those spaces inside organizations, which was Edge was about, but to ensure that my space was collaborative as well.
Yeah.
And Yeah, and you guys, because you do this together, you collaborate together and you stand on one another's shoulders and you inspire one another and you challenge one another. And that's a real challenge for a lot of solopreneurs. So I started the company in 2013 and we grew incredibly fast. And so 2 years in, my husband's name is Kevin. He quit his job, came in to run the operations. And before long, we had a wait list. I was the only one facilitating the group coaching experiences. So we started to hire coaches and train coaches. And we went that way all the way up until the pandemic. And we had a whole, group of coaches that were delivering for our clients. And then when everything happened with the pandemic, we had some clients who got super busy during the pandemic. And because of that, had to put a hold on their leadership programs. We had other clients that were in the construction and industrial space who had to furlough employees. So we had this white space. And in this beautiful white space, which I recognize how much privilege is in that, as I say that, in this beautiful white space, Kevin and I sat down and really looked at the trajectory of the company to date and what our strategic plan was in moving forward. Because all of a sudden new kinds of clients started to find us. And it used to be that only, $5 billion plus worked for our model. We had always been hybrid, 75% virtual. And I had a heck of a time convincing companies that you could curate connection and belonging virtually. They're like, no, you got to fly everybody in and get a conference room and hotels and all of these things. And I'm like, no, there's this thing called Zoom. And, so we were only targeting the largest of the large, because if we were going to get a peer group together, the leaders had to be dispersed, right? So they were running stations or hubs or regions all across the country, and we could bring those leaders together once a month to share best practices. Well, now all of a sudden, everyone was remote. So small to mid-sized companies were reaching out and saying, what can you do? We heard you're doing this. Do you have a program for us? And that's when I realized I can't say yes to all of this. And if I do, then when my current clients come back, I'm not going to have the capacity. And I also realized that I didn't enjoy mentoring and training and quality control checking coaches and, all of this space that the business had kind of overgrown into based on client need, but not necessarily my strategic direction and certainly not my passion. And so the idea for the book came from that moment of, all right, if I'm going to shift my business model as an entrepreneur and cherry pick the clients that I simply want to play with because I dig them, what does that mean for the model? If we know that the need is going up, we know we have figured out the way to curate connection and belonging virtually, well, let's open source the model. And so that was the thought process for the book. And I had someone the other day say to me, you didn't hold back, like you put all of your tricks and secrets and everything. Aren't you worried that your competitors are going to read that? And I said, I hope they do. Yeah. I hope they do. There needs to be more of this work in the world, and there is more than enough work to go around.
Right on. But one of our mantras, if in our approach to intentional leadership development, is never learn alone. So that idea, when I saw the title of your book and that whole approach, that rang true for us. So, Richard, you had a question, I believe.
Well, I was just going to comment that was very much the approach for our book on strategy-driven leadership, which is we call it a playbook. And it basically has all of the elements that you need to have this leadership model in place. And what, we sent it off to a young woman a couple of weeks ago who runs a startup jewelry company out in Los Angeles. And she wrote us back saying, I have dog-eared different pages, and this is going to be so helpful for me, even in her small, I think will be a highly successful business. I think giving people that information is what they want today. People want transparency, and I think in your work, Christy, which comes across so powerfully is your authenticity. You are what you see. You are what you present, and that's such an honorable trait, and so I think rare among business people these days. And I think many coaches aspire to it, even in the work of coaching, yet few achieve it. And I think your excitement and your passion comes through very clearly. So that certainly is a gift for me in the time that we've spent and worked together.
Yeah, cool. So PEER stands for something, I believe. If I read the book correctly. Can you tell us a little bit about what that model reflects?
Absolutely. And I would think that your listeners, since they are familiar with your philosophy, I think it will really resonate with them. So P is partnership. The idea that it's not all about me. Instead, it is about me in collaboration with you. It is showing up together vulnerably. It is holding one another accountable, and it's contributing to one another's successes by sharing our lessons learned, as well as our successes. I think that piece often gets missed when leaders get together in, whatever peer group that looks like. We have a tendency to go towards venting first versus celebrating the success. And I think there's a real cost in that. When I know what successes that you have had, then I know who in my network I could go to when I run into trouble. So that's the P. The first E is experience, and that is based on the concept of outcomes. And quite frankly, outcomes are nothing more than what does success look like to you? So if we are engaging together, what does success look like for you? What are your individual outcomes when you're facilitating an entire group? Whether that is you're a people leader and you have your team, whether that is you are a coach or a facilitator and you're facilitating a group, what's the group's outcomes? I learned this from you, Michael Couch, way back when I had hired you around, team dynamics and, what are the group's outcomes? What are the individual outcomes? And I asked that question as one of my first questions before we even kicked off today. Tell me about your outcomes. What is it that you want me to focus on? What can bring the most value to your audience? So partnership, experience, and then the third is exposure. This goes back to that concept of practicing vulnerability that I learned from Brene Brown's work. And it's about, vulnerability to me is the birthplace of innovation. It is only when, think about my crash and burn moment. It's only when I, acknowledged, all right, I stink at being a sales manager. Could I choose to either improve my skills to become a better people leader? Or do I shift and focus on the piece that really fuels my heart, which is this coaching and mentoring, and how do I make a career specifically in that? And then the R is, I had a moment, reflection. The R is reflection. And, that is for me, oftentimes coaches talk about self-awareness. Reflection is the space where we pause. Think about what I shared about the privilege that I had in the lockdown, to stop and pause and really look at what all I am doing versus this crazy busy schedule of just doing and stop and pause and reflect. Not just what's working and what isn't, which as a leader, I have always had great discipline around, but where I've been more challenged is what do I like and what do I not like?
Yeah.
What is serving me, in terms of where I want to grow next and the impact that I want to have on the world.
Excellent. So in my mind, all the great research evidence behind why those tools are and that approach is effective is clicking. We're understanding now what the value of networks are,
Absolutely.
and not the organization chart. The idea of that never learn alone. The idea of the adults won't learn unless we have a real impact in mind. That we have the outcome in mind. So I love that model. Hey, and it spells a word.
It spells the word. I think the other thing that comes up for me that I would want to share around that concept of networks is the delineation of our operational networks versus our strategic networks. I do a lot of work with women in male-dominated industries. It's a passion of mine, obviously because of my background and feeling alone and not wanting other women to feel the same way. And I just had a conversation in a session with 77 women in a group coaching experience on Wednesday. And we were talking about this concept of women and those identifying with femininity are often really good at managing to their operational network. So if you think about the operational network, that's the network that you need to get crap done, right? It's what you want to get done in your team, in your organization, the impact that you want to have. And women are really good at building that network and leveraging it. We're not quite as good at the strategic network. And the strategic network is who are the group of people that are both inside and outside your company, both inside and outside your industry, who know who you are, who are sponsors and mentors on your journey and your career path. I read a great article not too long ago that had said a great test of a strategic network is this: do you have 5 people that you could call on tomorrow should you find that you lost your job, and they would actively help you? And if you don't, maybe you've been a little lax on that.
And the research around those strategic networks is that that's also what drives innovation. Not only if I get a job tomorrow, I have a problem. How can I learn more about this? And what we found during the pandemic is some of those networks suffered. So the idea of being very intentional about building those strategic networks is.
And it's easy to default to the operational because that's getting stuff done. The strategic, as you said, takes some reflection. So, Christy, one final question that we ask our guests, and you've kind of answered it, but I want to see if maybe there's another answer you might have, which is, we ask people, and we've all thought about, what the pandemic has done to us individually and societally. We've been asking people, what has the pandemic done for you? And you kind of shared a little bit of that in your discussions with your business partner and husband, Kevin. Is there any other insights that you would have about what gifts the pandemic has given to you?
You know what? I will give you a personal response to that, since I already gave you the professional one. And in doing so, I hope to lean into that core value of mine, which is authenticity, and the pillar in my life around vulnerability, which I talk about in the book. And that is the greatest gift of the pandemic for me, was that it created the space for my son to transition. So my son is transgender, and the pandemic and the lockdown created the space for both him and our family to for him to come out, for Kevin and I to support him, for us to explore what this meant for us as parents, what this meant in our marriage, what this meant for me as a woman and a mother. And it has shifted my work in ways that I cannot even explain, but way more powerfully, it has shifted who I am. And my son is my greatest teacher.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That is so powerful, and good for you guys for staying with him, and for him for discovering who he is. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Great. Chris, we want to thank you for joining us today on the Leadership Cafe. As a thank you, we want to send you a copy of Strategy Driven Leadership, which you will get a copy of. Christy, what's a good way for people to connect with you? Certainly they can find Peer Revolution on Amazon and all their favorite bookstores and book sites. Other ways for people to reach out and connect?
Absolutely. So find me on social media. You can search my name. You see my name there on the tile, Christy Uffelman, LinkedIn and Facebook. In Instagram, it's Christy @, not the @ symbol, Edge Leadership. So just search Christy @Edge Leadership, and I look forward to engaging with you there.
Super. Thank you so much. And for all of you who are listening, remember you can get all of the Leadership Cafe podcasts at your favorite podcast location, as well as on our social media sites that this will be broadcast on as well. So for all of us, and I want to thank our producer director, Chad Barr, for his technical expertise. Yay, Chad. And please join us for the next Leadership Cafe. I'm Richard Citron.
And I'm Michael Couch. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you on the future episodes of with great people like Christy Uffelman on the Leadership Cafe. Thank you.
So long, everyone.